friends, today we're reading the book all about baseball. It's called Flat Stanley Up at Bat. Stanley Lambchop lived with his mother, his father, and his little brother Arthur. Stanley was 4 feet tall and a foot wide and a ½ inch thick. He had been flat ever since a bulletin board fell on him. Sometimes being flat was a bit tricky. When he turned sideways, Stanley was hard to spot. A good gust of wind could sweep Stanley off his feet, but he never let his flatness get in his way. "I'm going to try out for baseball," Stanley told Arthur. Arthur helped Stanley practice. Stanley hit 1,000 pitches. He caught 1,000 fly balls. Stanley's hard work showed up at tryouts. "Congratulations," said Coach Bart. "You're our new center fielder." Opening day was bright and breezy. The teams ran into the field. "There's Stanley," cried Arthur. Mr. Lambchop snapped a picture. Mrs. Lambchop cheered. "Hooray for the players," she said. Stanley was the first batter. He stepped into the plate, turned sideways, and pulled back his bat. The pitcher squinted at Stanley. "This guy is so skinny. I can hardly see where to throw." He threw the pitch. Ball 1, another. Ball 2. 2 more balls, and Stanley earned a walk. "Good job," said Coach Bart. Stanley's team played well, but the 9th inning they led 6-5. The other team had one last chance. Their best hitter came to bat, blasted the ball towards the fence. Just then, a breeze picked up. Stanley ran, and he leaped into the air. Whoosh! Up floated Stanley. Plunk went the ball right into his glove. "Great play," says Arthur. Not everybody else agreed. "No fair," yelled somebody. "Flat players aren't allowed." Stanley felt crushed. That night Stanley talked to Arthur. "I'm a good player," he said. "And not just that, because I'm flat. But how can I prove it?" "I think I know a way," said Arthur. The day of the game was bright and breezy, but something was different. "Stanley," said Mrs. Lambchop. Her son was not flat. He was bursting out of his uniform. Mrs. Lambchop gasped. "My nice clean laundry!" A sock stuck out of Stanley's collar. A purple frilly blouse trailed from his pants. "That's my favorite one," said Mrs. Lambchop. There was no time to worry about the clothes. The batter smacked the ball over Stanley's head. Stanley ran and he leaped into the wind. But this time Stanley did not float up, and the ball didn't land in his glove. It sailed right over the fence. Soon it was Stanley's turn to bat. The pitcher had no trouble seeing where to pitch now. "Strike 1, said the umpire. "Strike 2, strike 3. In the bleachers, Arthur gulped. He made a terrible mistake helping Stanley unflatten himself. The last inning rolled around. The game was tied. Stanley came up to bat. He heard Arthur's voice. "Come on, Stanley, you could do it." The pitcher threw the ball, and Stanley smashed it. The ball flew into the outfield. Bap sounded off the wall. The right fielder ran to pick it up. Meanwhile, Stanley tore around the bases. First base, second base, third base. Stanley was heading home. But so was the ball. "Slide, Stanley, slide," yelled Coach Bart. Arthur's heart raced. If Stanley was still flat, he could slide so easily under the catcher's glove. But now? Stanley stretched out his arms, dove into home plate. There was a swirl of dirt and socks, and the umpire spread his arms out. "Safe," he called. "Woo-hoo!" Arthur hollered. Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop clapped so hard their hands hurt. "No fair," yelled somebody in the crowd. "Look at the muscles on that kid. Are players that big even allowed?" Stanley grinned. "Not so many socks next time," said Mr. Lambchop. Mrs. Lambchop looked down at Arthur, and no blouses. The end. Bye-bye.